Hello and welcome to Triads in Motion, episode 4. In this episode, we're continuing the work we did in the 3 episodes, so if you're just coming to this video, please take a look at those to get up to speed. There are a few new concepts in this video. One is going to be starting from the drop 2 first inversion chord, so our bass motion and our voice leading is going to be different according to the starting inversion. And also, we're going to look not at suspensions this time. This time we're looking at what are called retardations, which is an upside down suspension, if you like. So let's dive right in. I've changed the key as well in this episode. I'm in the key of E major, which is a nice, bright, guitar-friendly key. And as you can see, the first triad that I have in example G is just a closed root position E major chord. E, G sharp, and B. 1, 3, 5, do, mi, so. Now, if we take the inner note, the second note from the top, we drop it, we get this chord. G sharp, E, B. First inversion, E major triad, and we call this a drop 2 spacing. Now, this is going to be our kind of home bass chord. It's an inverted harmony. And in this episode, the new information is really this. Instead of systematically suspending or playing like an upper neighbor tone to each chord tone, what we're going to do is we're going to play a lower neighbor, or what music theorists call a retardation. The idea here is that we're going to just precede each chord tone with the scale tone, the diatonic scale tone, directly beneath it. Before we do that though, let's look at example H. And here we start with our first inversion, drop 2 E major chord. And like in previous episodes, we're going to go through the circle of fourths diatonically, and we're going to retain common tones. And we end up with this sound on H. Let me play it for you. I'll arpeggiate it once. Watch your sharps there, we have 4 sharps. So this ends up being a progression in which the bass progression is G sharp, A for 2 measures, then B, C sharp for 2 measures, D sharp, and then we end up on the root position, drop 2 E major chord. So spend some time with this example H, kind of get comfortable with that, and you'll see that the next 6 lines, the next 6 examples, all of the examples in this video, are going to be basically ways of taking each chord tone and playing a retardation in its place, so a note that is a diatonic second below. Let's go on to example I and explore this. So now we have now jazz players who have been playing their 7th chord arpeggios will notice that if you just look at one measure here in example I, because these are 7/8 retardations, the 7th going up to the octave of each chord, it's really like the whole measure makes up a major 7 chord. In other words, this could be called E major 7, all of those tones, or this is A major 7 with a 7 to 8 motion on each harmony. That's like minor 7 flat 5, right? So Instead of thinking that way though, continue to think about the main focus of this series, which is 3-part counterpoint, 3 voice textures. And we're thinking about voice motions. So let's move on to the second line of I and see how these play out when we play a retardation preceding the third of each harmony. So this is the second line of I. We start like this now. So the fingerings are getting a little wacky. You could explore different options for this. In the tablature linked in the description for this video, I'll put in a solution that is a little more playable than what I might improvise just on the fly. But you can hear comparing it to H. If you were to play the chord from H and then play the first line of the second example, I. So you hear how the 2, 3, or the 9th of the chord resolves to the 3rd. Some of this sounds somehow a little bit Americana. I think with the 9ths in there and like the open 5ths on this chord, there's something. Maybe not that one. Here's the C sharp. And now the third line of I. This time the 4ths are resolving to the 5ths of each chord. Sometimes those 4ths are a perfect 4th above the root, and sometimes they are an augmented 4th above the root. It just depends on where we are in the scale. Again, we're only using diatonic tones, so they work out a little differently depending on where we are in the scale. Here's the third line of I slowly. Listen to the 4ths moving up to the 5th. Okay, at J, we keep the outer voices static. They are, in other words, they are the chord tones voice leading just in the same way that they did in our first example, example H. The inner voice is moving with the retardation, and it's different in each measure, you know, which tone is being embellished. So in the example J, the first chord is a 7, 8, and then it becomes a 4, 5. Then it becomes a 2, 3, and so on. Now I'm changing string sets a bit as I do these fingerings. And again, with this 3-part counterpoint stuff, there are many, many fingering possibilities. It's good to play through these exercises and find different solutions. In the tablature, I will try to put some that are most playable, but not necessarily the only solution. Let's look at the second line of J. Here, same principle. We're using the same voice leading as our original example H, only this time the lower voice is being systematically retarded. In the first chord, it's a 2, 3. Then it's a 7, 8, etc., 4, 5. And in our final example, the upper voice moves, and we get this. We get a 4, 5. Okay, that's it for episode 4. What we've covered so far are drop 2 spacings. We've looked at single and double suspensions, and now we've added the concept of the retardation. And this starts to open up the idea of an enclosure. The idea was touched upon in an early episode, but what you could do is take the example H, start to improvise with these voicings, stay on each measure for a while, and experiment with enclosing each of the chord tones with the scale tones upper and lower neighbors. So there I enclose the 5th, or I could enclose the root, or I can enclose the 3rd. Then moving to A, I use the sharp 4 because we're more of a Lydian sound because we're in the key of E. Or that could be enclosing the 5th. And so I would spend a bit of time on each of these kind of harmonic zones and explore now the idea of enclosures around each of these tones. In the next episode, we're going to look at double retardations in the same way that we looked at double suspensions in episode 2. Please subscribe and check out the PDFs that I have for sale in the link in the description. It helps me a lot to keep going and to develop this series further. There are many, many ideas that I want to get into with this 3-voice counterpoint and triads. And with your support, I can continue to develop these materials. Thank you. See you next time.